Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here today for the Discovery Team's presentation. My name is Ann Ryland, as many of you know, and I'd like to introduce the other members of the team. Brooks Hibner, David Hess, and Rob Schaefer. And we have other members of the team, absolutely wonderful as well, who could not be here today. Jackie Roberts, Maria Coyne, Chris Happ. And Kim Kiyosaki was with us early on. The team was tasked to assess the current state of our church community, to identify key needs and opportunities, and serve as a guide in the selection of our next senior minister. Thank you to many of you who participated in the surveys and the listening sessions. Our multi-generational team made every attempt to let the data and the congregation guide us. Though the efforts attempted to engage a broad cross-section of our congregation, the survey was heavily weighted to older members, and those answering the gender question, 69% were female. For younger participants, 31 who completed the survey were under the age of 55, and 76% were female. For listening sessions where only adults participated, in other words, not including our session for youth, we found the mix of by age and gender similar to that of the survey. We were able to hold 11 listening sessions, 90 minutes long, with 112 participants. And again, many thanks to all of you who served as roles for those sessions. Today, we'll give a brief summary from the themes and recommendations, with time for questions at the end. But first, some positives. On the survey, music during worship, including choir, anthems, instrumentals, received high marks. That was also true in the listening sessions. Sunday morning worship also received high marks. Members are also happy with the church's engagement in acts of charity and service to persons in need.
So overall, we summarized the data into kind of 4 themes of what members think, how we could maybe improve some of some of the members help address some of the important qualities for our next minister. Community growth and opportunities, ministerial focus, and sermons. Starting off with community. So again, kind of overall members felt that there was positive feelings about our community at Union Church. However, there were about 25% of people that didn't feel that they had a close friend in church, and about a third of the people who took this survey didn't see kind of the opportunity for excitement or kind of the future of the church, how we're doing essentially. So there's some work to do there. Hand it over to Rob.
Thanks. Good morning. The second theme revolved around growth and opportunities, as shared by the congregation, as shared by you. So thank you for everybody who did participate. First and foremost, members expressed an appreciation for where they see UCC's values today, with our foundation of kindness, patience, and care that defines us. They've expressed a clear desire for enhanced programs to engage youth, more events like adult education to connect with the wider community, and a robust pastoral care network to support all in need. There is an urgent need to strengthen collaboration and communication. Challenges include unclear leadership roles and incomplete directory, lack of transparency in decision-making, as a few that were noted. Members feel barriers to ministry involvement and hesitate to express opinions. To grow together, we must build centralized, respectful communication channels, foster open conflict resolution, and nurture inclusivity, and especially embracing newer families. By addressing these opportunities for growth, we can deepen our sense of community and better achieve our mission.
So the third theme was ministerial focus. And what jumped out to us were two camps, essentially, of responses. One thought that the way we have traditionally handled the senior minister role was the way to go. That is a role of a CEO or a general manager, kind of a final point that everybody reports to. And that is certainly one way we could continue to do it. That means overseeing all the administrative work of the church, as well as leading the pastoral and preaching and teaching work. Others were pointing out that we really need somebody who's good at the preaching and the teaching and the pastoral care. How about if we considered outsourcing some of that administrative work, or tapping volunteers for the administrative work, or even potentially hiring a person who would be a lead administrator? So that's just something the church will need to wrestle with on what is the right way for us to go about that.
There was much discussion around the topic of what makes for a good sermon and to what extent politics should play a role from the pulpit. Combined data from the listening sessions and surveys showed three themes. Some define a good sermon as addressing issues they agree with in order to provide solace and comfort in their daily lives. Some want a sermon to engage with different theological perspectives. And others want sermons to include contemporary issues they're facing. Regardless, members overwhelmingly expressed interest in sermons that not only relate to their existence, but are thought-provoking while helping them navigate through their daily lives. Looking towards our church's future, it will be important to explore faithful debate and healthy engagement with this, and think about how we define and differentiate political from social justice.
So in terms of communication and membership, again, a quarter of people felt like they didn't have a close friend, so maybe we could continue to encourage people to invite their friends and coworkers to church. Also, find a way to have more small group interaction, and so, especially intergenerational groups, so possibly bring back the mentorship program where we can have new members, maybe younger, with some of the older members. Along with that, clearing up some of the expectations and roles in terms of groups. So there's a lot of small groups, but maybe we're not doing a great job of inviting other people, because sometimes that could fall through the cracks. So figuring out who should do what, essentially, in a lot of our small groups. Using a data-based approach to kind of understand what our membership looks like. So we're doing a great job of tracking, but we could probably do a little bit better, more granular in terms of why people have started watching, whether it's YouTube or why they actually came, just to kind of understand that better. Launch the communication campaign, so to better understand the directory, so that we can find kind of the people easier, and it seems to be a little bit cumbersome at this point, so working to improve that. Encouraging, of course, as always, a culture of tolerance and respect, and making sure that we're all feeling comfortable to be able to resolve some conflicts or some differences, I think we think would be helpful. Educational opportunities.
We have the opportunity to focus on hosting educational opportunities that only provide interest, but speak to various gaps in our congregation's knowledge. Hosting classes and sessions that focus on what it means to be part of the United Church of Christ, as well as Union Church, historically and in regard to policy. Providing opportunities to further learn what it means to be a lay-led congregational church. Our listening session shows that interpretation gets interpreted in many different ways. We can expand adult education opportunities because there's demand from the congregation, particularly related to contemporary issues. And additional educational programs serve as a benefit not only to members, but to others who might be interested in Union Church.
So the third recommendation area ties back to the one that came up about sermons. When the sermon theme popped out of the data, That was 7 people making specific comments in the survey sections about please, essentially, no politics from the pulpit, and versions of something like that. So that was clearly an issue. When it came up in our small group, which by the way is a nicely balanced men, women, younger, older, there was not a clear line on what exactly is politics, and how does that relate to social justice, and is there somewhere that they're overlapping here? So we need to really clearly as a congregation try to better define when people don't want to hear about politics, exactly what does that mean? And when people do want to hear about social justice issues, what exactly does that mean? And how can we embrace everybody and have that view that we do here, that we welcome everyone and we welcome all points of view? We need to be tolerant, and that's an important point of definition. I might have covered all that right there. Let me just leave it right there. Move this for you.
The next part of our recommendation for leadership is around government and leadership. We identified a few themes, and you'll recognize some of these with the themes or the items that we've brought up to so far. So really reviewing the organizational structure of Union Church. So determining what is an administrative role, a business role, and how the senior minister fulfills that role or fits in that role. Review policies and procedures that define the relationship of the UCECP program. So how can we enhance that? How can we encourage membership from that program? Because that's a big piece of the church, and there's a lot of opportunity there as well. But also, how is the church and the church's roles responsible for staff decisions within UCCP? So exploring that and coming to a definition there as well. The Executive Council should consider enhancing the website and including the history of the church. We should address inconsistencies of non-existent patterns of congregational care. So there's been some areas where congregational care has been phenomenal for a lot of people, but then less so for others. So really defining that and creating less inconsistencies. And then finally, just a piece of administrative advice, creating a shared drive. That way, if there's transitions within the administration, all the files that different folks have worked on, rather than being on a personal computer or on a work computer, they're in a shared drive, so that way there's consistency with the files.
Okay, so we've tried to boil that down to why we started this process in the first place, which is what would we as a congregation like to see in the qualities and the roles of our next senior minister. So there's a very nice summary on page 19, and for anybody who hasn't read it, be sure and pick up that handout and actually read it. It's a really quick read. Some of it you'll know and can kind of scan through, but do please pay attention to this. The summary that actually I think Rob ended up writing is at the top of that page, and I'm just going to read this to you because each of these words has meaning. An effective senior minister for Union Church of Hinsdale is a warm, caring, dynamic spiritual leader who excels in communication, engages with both the community and the congregation, provides pastoral care and thought-provoking sermons, is sensitive to congregational needs, upholds the church's mission of inclusivity, and collaborates effectively with staff and lay leaders. So that's a nice encapsulation. Below that, there's a number of additional points, and I'll just pull a few things that are supplemental to what I just read to you. People have asked for help providing clarity about living faithful lives. A dynamic preacher will be somebody who is attracting both our existing people who are already showing up, our existing members who are not showing up, and attracting new members from the community. We really need somebody who's a team player, open-minded team player. We have a fantastic staff. We have fantastic lay leaders. We need somebody to come in and work with that team, not start all over. We need somebody who's able to discuss contemporary issues, which there's a lot of interest in contemporary issues, without the political overtones that are driving some people away. How do we get into discussing those definitions, which I mentioned earlier, and coming to a conclusion about that? We need a person who can handle that kind of oversight. We need a person who draws out members' strengths and those who are having trouble making friends or getting involved. Be the person to start fires and help people get involved. We need an active participant, somebody who's visible in the community, visible at church functions, visible in community functions, and people can say, oh yeah, that's one of the senior ministers at Union Church. Ideally, we would have somebody who could perhaps help our thinking about youth programming. Youth and children's programs that work for modern families is a trick. Everyone knows that. We just drove by the Hinsdale football field on the way over here coming to church today, and there's a huge number of young families with children playing lacrosse, I think. And then finally, ideally again, we would find somebody who had a record of giftedness in guiding stewardship. If you look at the community section here, or you live in this general community, this is a very high income area, and our average pledge is a little over $4,000. So to the extent that that's going to be anywhere near a biblical tithe of 10%, we're not that close. And so somebody who could help us understand that and move in that direction would be wonderful. That was the gist of our report. Again, the report is sitting over there. We have raw data for anybody that really wants to dig into this themselves. Adriana has access to 2 files. The first file is all of the survey data, which is a PowerPoint presentation and includes charts for people that like to see graphs of data. That's there. There's also all the percentages for the people that like to dig down into the numbers. It's about 100 pages long, so we're not printing that out just in case anybody wants to take one home. It's easy to look at on a computer. There's also a separate file that shows all of the answers given at our listening sessions. And again, it's a lot to look at. It's 37 pages of information. But you're welcome to look at it and form your own thoughts and opinions and perhaps build on what we did here. So that's all available to you. We would encourage you to look at it. Also, for a summary or for anybody that just does not want to dig into that much detail, in your appendix, which starts on page 24, there are some summaries to the more complicated questions that even if you're looking at the chart or the percentages, you have to really kind of think about it to get to the bottom line. We've got some just summary, what were the top 3 answers kind of things. And then there's also finally on page 26, a listening session summary. So taking the 38 pages and distilling that down with the help of artificial intelligence to here are some of the key themes that came out. That's there for you as well. So we hope that will be helpful for you, and we as a team will be happy to try to answer any questions you might have this morning or sometime after this morning. The next step will be that this report is already in the hands of Penny Davy and Executive Council, and they will be working with a search team to use this information to come up with a job description. So thank you for your time, and are there any questions we could try to answer this morning? Yes?
I was just clarifying the dynamic. I know you did a great job explaining the dynamic for you. It says who attracts existing members. But are we also using dynamic in the sense that it's someone we expected who already has the ability to make changes with time? Like meaning that static as opposed to dynamic. So it's someone who's always kind of moving. Or always kind of going up on information and how we move forward. So it's like a very involved term dynamic. So is that what we were thinking also?
So I'll give you my impression. There could be multiple impressions to that. I like what is the meaning of the word dynamic, the way it's used here. And
In education, we use it to shift easily and efficiently as needed and to be in motion. So I'm just wondering if that's the same, in motion with the community. So as opposed to static. So I'm just wondering if
The way this came out to me in reading the data, and these are your responses we're trying to consolidate here, I would define that word in this context as being someone who is outgoing and engaging and warm, a kind of a person that you would like to talk to after the service, for example, over your cup of coffee. But I'll take that too. I'd be loving that, somebody who stays current and understands that things change. If anybody else has a different view, feel free to step up here. Yes, Ollie.
I was just curious, maybe I missed this, and I saw all the data about, obviously Hinsdale's a high-end community, et cetera, and what we need in our technical new senior pastor. Was there by chance a sort of summary of what the congregation actually is in 2025? And what I mean by that is, without pointing fingers, about 10 years ago, I think that we lost a very large percentage of maybe your more traditional thinking congregational members. And so what we are now is probably very different than when I joined in 2009. And I was just kind of wondering if there was any sort of summary on what we are as a whole in kind of that sense now.
There is a section that talks about the church membership in this report. It's on page 10. It's section B of the congregation. The one thing I would point out to you, and this came down in a series of recommendations when I stepped down as moderator a couple of years ago, we really need better information. Trying to get to exactly what you're asking about is easier said than done. In a church environment, this isn't like a club where you pay dues, and if you don't pay your dues, you're just kicked out. You don't actually have to pay anything to belong to this church. We would like it if you would. We will need somebody to do it if we're to sustain ourselves, but it's not actually required. So it's easy for people to come and go, and they don't necessarily call the church and say, you know what, I've decided to not go to your church anymore, or they've moved and they don't think about saying, I don't really need to be on your roll. So we have a very squishy amount of data, but what we do have is shared with you here. Any other questions, or I'll let you go home for lunch, whichever you'd prefer. Oh, sorry. Carlton's got a question here.
Hi, I'm Carlton, and I kind of found the report to be like staging a house for sale. You take all the stuff out that makes a house a home, and you paint all the walls white. And so the biggest part was missing was the urgency of youth, Christian ed, and family. I think the reference to family was only used, as I saw in the report, young families. And then finances. I noted that pledge income has been flat for 6 straight years, $800,000. That means we're failing. We're losing to inflation every year in a period of extreme inflation. So what we're doing now is not working. We have a great music program, a great endowment. It's not getting people into the church. And so we need urgency that I didn't see in there. So those are my observations. Thanks for the report.
You're welcome, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Are there other questions?
Oh, John Jacobs.
I think my history is getting in the way of my only thinking, but I'm thinking that this wizard that you're looking for is not the Wizard of Oz. It is somebody who has a lasting tenure here. And have you been thinking in terms of a lasting tenure? I have not heard that mentioned in your prepared statements. And I think in terms of the people in the past whose pictures are on the wall, some of the most important ones, in my personal opinion, and that's humble opinion, are the ones who were the longest lasting because they satisfied for the longer time, and that's what my issue is here. Are you looking at the long-range person, the one who is willing to be planted in place?
Another good question. That did not seem to appear anywhere in the surveys and listening session. And you did mention a wizard, but it could be a, male or female wizard as well. So I think that'd be wonderful. I don't know in today's congregational lives if pastors tend to stay for a certain amount of time. It used to be, it seemed like it was about 10 years, and not just here, but in other churches in the surrounding areas. So, Tim, you have ideas on that?
Well, I've always got ideas. This is data. The average tenure of a pastor is 4 to 8 years, and that goes across multiple sizes of congregations. So you've got some long-serving pastors here already, and just know that's 4 to 8 years is the norm. Data.
And I would just say too that our job is to kind of help you determine what it is you told us. The search committee can take this and decide how do we want to position that in terms of our marketing and who we're looking for. Are we looking for somebody with a certain amount of tenure? Or are we looking more for somebody with some tenure with a lot of longevity potentially behind them? That's the next group's decision. Yes, Bob.
For the people online, you do.
Oh, online? First, thanks for all the time that you do. I mean, the patience, I can't imagine what it's like, so God bless you. But I think when you look at that person, you'll probably never find that has all those qualities. And I just think it's important when you get in these type of searches, I know you've probably talked about this, pick the top 1 or 2 or 3 major qualities that you're looking for. The other thing is you've got a sliding priority to that question because 79% of the people that responded to the questionnaire were over 55. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure the percentage of people in your listening sessions that you went to, how many were of a younger age group?
Similar.
Roughly similar.
How many?
Roughly similar to the data you're citing.
What is it? So the majority of the people that want that may not necessarily frame as this okay, whatever. Thanks for all you do. Come on over to Miles for a cocktail and we'll talk some more.
Thank you, Bob.
Are there other further questions? Dana?
What I heard from your summary is that there's specific topics that the church is very divided on, or you got a divisive answers on, and that you'll have to decide that, which way in terms of like one of them was the political question. How will the team decide that if we have data now that the church is divided on some of these important topics? Like, what are the next steps to overcome that?
Penny, you might be the better person to answer that.
I was going to address that we're in conversation now about having maybe a Saturday retreat to talk about exactly that. We want to be challenged, and I heard this specifically from Grant. We want to be challenged, but we don't really want to be challenged. So we have to sort that out, or we're not going to be able to know who we're going to call. And so we have coming weeks and more conversations about what's been parsed from our words on the survey, our words in listening sessions, and the hours and hours, countless hours that this team has put together. So we want to honor that and sort through exactly what you're asking before we actually are ready to put out a job description. Because we have to know ourselves, who we are, before we can ask someone else to come into our midst to stay for as long as we would like them to. So if there aren't any other questions, although I do want to give an opportunity for everybody, I think this team and the others who couldn't be present today deserve a huge round of applause from us.
That's very kind of you. One thing I would just highlight again is that as much as we had difficulty getting the views of younger people and men in the surveys, the balance of this group was fantastic. And so we had this little nice microcosm of young and old and women and men. It was wonderful. So thank you for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.